Joining me on the program now from Christian Savings, Andy Milne. Andy, kia ora, thanks for your time.
Kia ora, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
Firstly, I mean, this is good news about interest rates going down. In some ways, this means that it's easier to borrow money. There's less costs of getting into your first home in terms of interest rates, repayments, etc. That's good news, right?
Oh, it's unquestionably good news for borrowers. So for home buyers, obviously that's going to make houses more affordable. But right through the economy, it's good news. Any business that needs to borrow money is going to benefit from reduced interest rates. So definitely a good thing for the economy.
Can I just challenge that assumption, though? It is good news for people who currently have a house, but we've got a bit of a problem here because interest rates going down will be maybe more people will go, oh gosh, we can buy a house. We're not building houses fast enough to match that supply. So schoolboy economics, supply and demand, if more people want to buy and there's not an increase in the supply, then maybe the prices aren't going to go down. The cost of borrowing will go down, but maybe not the price of houses.
Andrew, if you want schoolboy economics, you have come to the right place. So, look, you're absolutely right. It is a supply and demand issue, and obviously, as lower interest rates, trickle through, that's going to mean more demand for housing, which is potentially going to butt up against our supply constraints and create potential price rises. Housing supply has been a generational problem in New Zealand, and currently, we've seen figures come out recently that says that building consents are lower this year than they were even last year. And that's not completely evenly distributed. Canterbury and further south, Queenstown and Invercargill, they're in I wouldn't call it a boom, but certainly in positive territories.
Yep.
Wellington, on the other hand, consents are down 30%
Wow.
year on year. So certainly, some struggles there. Borrowing costs has only been one issue. There have been long-standing constraints around local and central government regulation.
Yep.
Cost of construction, which is not unrelated to regulations, and labour shortages as well. You only have to open the paper each day to see stories of more tradies heading to greener pastures.
Yep.
in Australia. So a lot of issues still to address.
Wanting to focus in on the cost of construction, because it's all very well that you can borrow the money, but if it is much cheaper to buy a house than it is to build a similar house, then that is going to put a lot of pressure on the market. What needs to change in that space? And this is quite complicated, but the cost of building in New Zealand, I mean, there were some excuses around COVID, around supply of materials, etc., but that was 5 years ago. What is keeping the price of construction so high in New Zealand?
Well, historically, there have been a number of factors, and there's some quite complicated interplay between government and central government and local government regulation. A couple of things, perennially, a lot of people have pointed to the RMA, the Resource Management Act, as a handbrake on growth.
Yep.
The government has announced that it is repealing and replacing the RMA, which is going to, improve or streamline the process of not just, rezoning land, so more land that is going to be available for urban development, but also making infill development easier too. So not just making it easier for cities to grow outward, but for cities to grow upward as well. That's been a time-consuming and costly exercises for most of the country. So things like that as well. But the government's also been doing some work recently, working with local councils, providing, greater direction around land zoning. So recently, the government have sort of issued directions that they expect local councils to have land zoned to meet 30 years worth of demand for growth, which is up from previous requirements only for 3.
Yeah.
So we are going to see some improvements there. So those regulations around what's permitted and where, that is going to have an impact, Andrew, for sure.
And hey, the regulation is a good thing, and I know some changes around some of the monopolies on building materials here in New Zealand. That's all very good, but if you can't find a builder, this is a big part of the problem as well. There's some smaller building firms that have gone to the wall in the last few years, and those who haven't moved to Central Otago or Christchurch because of their mini boom, it can be tough to get the tradies. Again, supply and demand. Difficult to get the people to do the job for you.
Well, that's right, Andrew. And I think, that's always been an issue in New Zealand, that, we aren't typically as high a wage economy as our cousins in Australia and further afield. So that's always going to be an issue. I think, the more that we do to make building easier in New Zealand, the more attractive it's going to be for businesses to retain staff and just make that easier in New Zealand. Another point, I guess, that you touched on earlier was the point about construction materials, building materials, and we've had one or two players having an effective monopoly on a lot of very common building products, and made it very hard for builders, for architects, and other players to bring in products that are pretty common overseas that you just don't see in New Zealand. So one major change that the government's announced is relaxing the regulations around those building materials, so that if you've got a cladding product or I guess a plasterboard product or anything like that that's internationally well recognised, approved for use in similar climates, then there's going to be a pathway to have that automatically approved in New Zealand, something that we haven't seen before. I think in America I saw something like plasterboard in America is something like 60% cheaper over there than it is here. So and there's a lot more competition and variety of products. So anything we can do to bring those products down is going to make that cost per square metre of building a house
and the cost
much cheaper for us as well.
The cost per square metre to build the same house in Australia as you would in New Zealand, quite a significant difference, and probably the people building the house in Australia are Kiwi born, just to add insult to injury in that regard, but much cheaper to build the same house in Australia at the moment.
Well, from anecdotally, I've seen numbers, that it's up to $1,000 per square metre cheaper to build a house in Australia. And when you factor in, that wages for tradies are higher in Australia, that's quite a staggering drop. So, plenty of work for us to do in that area, I think, Andrew.
Of course, it affects homeowners, but it also affects the charitable sector, those people that are wanting to build social housing as a part of their faith community. Everybody's caught in the squeeze on this one, Andy.
Well, absolutely. And just, on that, one other thing that the government's definitely got a role in is that social housing space. Kāinga Ora at the moment are building something like 7% of all new houses, or at least 7% of all new consents issued at the moment to Kāinga Ora. The social sector, the faith-based sector, moving ahead as well. And there are a few other, investment agents, well, not investors, but I guess there are places like new players in the market like Simplicity Living and Home Capital Partners that are demonstrating that you can invest in housing. And on more, probably not so much in the home ownership, but certainly the build to rent space. But investors can invest in housing and get both a social dividend in terms of providing affordable rentals, but also make a viable economic return as well. So a lot going on in those sectors. And so I guess more the public and social housing, not just the private investors and homeowners.
Yeah, hey, it is a complicated issue, but thank you for your insight, your comments on this particular issue, Andy. Thanks for what you do at Christian Savings. Of course, christiansavings.co.nz for more about the work that you do. But thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.